Maya Ellison had heard those words so many times that they no longer stung the way they used to. She had heard them from instructors who doubted her steady hands, from squad mates who assumed her calm nature meant weakness, and from men who had spent their entire careers believing that a rifle belonged only in certain hands. She never argued. She never raised her voice. She simply nodded, picked up her weapon, and kept practicing long after everyone else had gone home for the night. She had grown up far from any military base, on a small ranch where the wind never seemed to stop blowing, and the horizon stretched out further than anyone could see. Her grandfather, a quiet man who rarely spoke more than a few words at a time, had taught her to shoot before she had even learned to ride a bicycle. He used to say that a good shot was not about strength or speed, but about patience, breath, and respect for the moment. Maya carried those words with her every single day of her life, long after her grandfather had passed away, long after she had left the ranch behind to join the army. For 3 years, she had proven herself again and again on ordinary training grounds, yet she had twice been denied a place in the elite sniper program. The reasons given were always vague, always wrapped in polite language that hid a simple truth. Nobody believed she belonged there. She kept her disappointment private. She trained even harder, arriving before dawn and staying long after sunset, going over every detail of her technique until it became instinct rather than thought. The annual Inter-Battalion Marksmanship Championship was the most anticipated event on the base's calendar. Soldiers from every unit gathered to compete, and this year, nearly 4,000 troops and officers had come to watch, filling the stands that surrounded the long, dusty firing range. Some had traveled from neighboring bases just for the spectacle. It was the kind of event where reputations were made and legends were born, and everyone wanted to see the current record holder, Staff Sergeant Cole Briggs, defend his title once again. Maya had not even planned to compete. She was meant to be a backup, filling in only if someone dropped out. When her squad mate injured his shoulder during a routine drill just 2 days before the competition, she found herself thrust into a spot on the roster that nobody expected her to fill. Word spread through the base almost instantly. By the next morning, she could feel the weight of stares following her everywhere she went, some curious, some amused, and some openly doubtful. It was her own sergeant, a gruff but not unkind man named Wallace, who said the words that would follow her for the rest of the competition. He had not meant to be cruel. He had simply repeated what many others were already thinking, the assumption baked so deeply into years of habit that he barely noticed he was saying it out loud. "She can't do it," he said to another officer, not realizing Maya was close enough to hear every word. She did not turn around. She did not react in any visible way. Instead, she walked to the equipment table and requested the more difficult rifle configuration, the one that required greater skill and offered far less room for error. If people expected her to fail, she decided she would at least fail while attempting something worth remembering. But quietly, in the corner of her heart where no one else could see, she made a promise to herself that she would not fail at all. The competition began early the next morning, under a pale sky streaked with thin clouds. The qualifying rounds tested speed, accuracy, and control under pressure. Targets appeared and disappeared without warning, forcing competitors to react in fractions of a second. Some of the most experienced shooters on the base stumbled during these rounds, rattled by nerves or by the sheer number of eyes watching their every move. Maya did not stumble. She moved through each round with a calm, steady rhythm that seemed almost out of place amid the tension surrounding her. She did not celebrate her hits or react to her occasional misses. She simply reset, breathed, and continued. Other competitors began to notice her composure, and slowly, quietly, the whispers about her started to change in tone. The doubt was still there, but it had begun to mix with curiosity. By the end of the second day, only a handful of shooters remained in contention, and among them were Maya and Staff Sergeant Briggs. Briggs was well-liked and deeply respected, a man who had earned his reputation through years of consistent excellence. He was not arrogant, but he was confident in a way that came from never having been seriously challenged before. When he noticed Maya's name still on the leaderboard beside his own, he offered her a respectful nod rather than dismissal, though few others extended her the same courtesy. The final rounds moved to the long-range course, a stretch of open land where wind patterns shifted unpredictably across small hills and dry riverbeds. This was where true skill was separated from mere talent. Distance targets appeared as tiny specks, barely visible without the aid of a scope, and even the slightest miscalculation in wind or breathing could send a shot far off its mark. Maya thought often of her grandfather during these rounds, remembering the long afternoons he had spent teaching her to read the movement of grass and dust, to understand what the wind was doing, before she ever raised her rifle. She thought about the patience he had shown her, never rushing her, always reminding her that a shot rushed was a shot wasted. She carried his lessons with her onto that range, letting them guide her hands and her breath. Round after round, she matched Briggs shot for shot. The crowd, which had started the competition mostly focused on him, began shifting its attention toward her instead. There was something magnetic about watching someone perform with such quiet confidence, especially someone so many had already written off before she had even fired her first shot. Soldiers who did not know her name 2 days earlier now leaned forward whenever it was her turn to shoot. By the final afternoon, the competition had narrowed to a tie between Maya and Briggs. The organizers announced a tiebreaker unlike anything the base had attempted before. It would be a single shot, taken from an extraordinary distance of 1,200 meters, at a target so small, it would be barely visible even through a high-powered scope. Competitors would have only 90 seconds to read the wind, adjust their aim, and fire. There would be no second attempt, one shot, one chance. The stands fell into an unusual hush when the announcement was made. Even soldiers who cared little for the technical details of marksmanship understood the significance of what they were about to witness. Word spread quickly through the crowd that this shot would later be remembered as one of the most difficult ever attempted on the base. A shot so precise in its demands that even seasoned instructors admitted they were not certain they could make it themselves. Briggs went first. He approached his position with the same calm assurance that had defined his career, adjusting his stance and studying the flags positioned along the range to gauge the wind's shifting direction. The crowd held its breath as he settled into position, made his calculations, and fired. The shot landed close, remarkably close, but not quite at the center of the target. A murmur rippled through the stands. It was an excellent shot by any ordinary standard, yet it left the smallest opening for someone to surpass it. Now it was Maya's turn. She walked to her position without hurrying, her expression unreadable beneath the calm mask she had worn throughout the entire competition. Somewhere in the crowd, Sergeant Wallace watched with his arms crossed, unaware that his earlier words were about to be answered in the most public way possible. Maya adjusted her position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle settle into her shoulder, the way it always had, ever since she was a young girl, standing beside her grandfather on the ranch. She studied the flags first, noting the way they fluttered unevenly, a sign that the wind was shifting in unpredictable gusts across the long stretch of open ground between her and the target. She thought of her grandfather's voice, calm and steady, reminding her that wind was not an enemy to fight, but a partner to understand. She breathed slowly, allowing her heartbeat to settle into a rhythm that matched the stillness she needed to find within herself. 90 seconds felt both impossibly short and strangely endless. She made her calculations quickly but carefully, accounting for the distance, the elevation, and the shifting gusts that threatened to carry her shot astray. She adjusted her aim by the smallest of margins, trusting the countless hours of practice that had trained her body to respond instinctively, even when her mind raced through numbers and angles. The crowd had gone completely silent, thousands of people holding their breath together, as though the outcome of this single shot mattered to every one of them personally. Maya blocked out the noise, the pressure, and the doubt that had followed her throughout the competition. In that moment, there was only the rifle, the wind, and the distant, nearly invisible target waiting at the end of her sights. She exhaled slowly, found her stillness, and fired. For a long moment, nothing happened. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the range officer's voice crackled clearly over the loudspeaker, confirming what the electronic scoring system had already registered. A direct hit, dead center, closer to perfect than any shot recorded in the history of the competition. The silence shattered instantly into an overwhelming roar. Nearly 4,000 troops rose to their feet at once, clapping, cheering, and shouting in a wave of sound that seemed to shake the very ground beneath the stands. Soldiers who had never spoken to Maya before found themselves cheering her name as though they had known her for years. Briggs, to his credit, was among the first to applaud, offering her a genuine, respectful smile as she lowered her rifle. Sergeant Wallace stood frozen for a moment, processing what he had just witnessed. Then, slowly, he stepped forward through the crowd, removed his cap, and offered Maya a formal salute in front of everyone watching. It was a small gesture, but it carried enormous weight, a public acknowledgement of everything he had underestimated about her just days earlier. Maya returned the salute calmly, without any trace of bitterness or triumph in her expression. She had never needed anyone's approval to know what she was capable of. She had only needed the chance to prove it. In the weeks that followed, Maya's name spread far beyond the walls of her own base. Officers from the sniper training program, the very program that had rejected her twice before, reached out personally to invite her to join their next class. This time, there was no vague language, no hidden hesitation. They simply stated that they wanted her, plainly and directly, because they had seen with their own eyes what she was capable of achieving under the most demanding conditions imaginable. Maya accepted the invitation with the same quiet composure she brought to everything else in her life. She did not gloat, and she did not dwell on the years of doubt that had preceded this moment. She simply packed her belongings, said goodbye to the friends she had made, and prepared for the next chapter of her career, carrying with her the lessons her grandfather had taught her on that windswept ranch so many years before. The record she set that day on the long-range course remained unbroken for years afterward, spoken about in quiet reverence whenever new recruits arrived at the base and asked about the greatest shot ever taken there. Veterans would tell the story of the day nobody believed a young woman could succeed, and how she had answered every doubt not with words, but with a single, perfectly placed shot that thousands of people would never forget. Maya rarely spoke about that day herself. When asked, she would simply say that she had done what she always did. She breathed, she focused, and she trusted everything she had spent years learning. But everyone who had been there that afternoon, standing among 4,000 others in complete silence before the loudest cheer they had ever heard, knew they had witnessed something far greater than a competition. They had witnessed the quiet, unstoppable strength of someone who refused to let anyone else's doubt define what she was capable of achieving.